Welcome everyone to Are We Being Kind to the LGBTQ Mind? My name is Jamie Barrell, and I am a learning and development facilitator at Publicis Sapient, and I also lead Égalité, which is Publicis Group's business resource group for our LGBTQ plus employees and their allies. Many of you will know that this week is Mental Health Awareness Week. And we know that, with the whole thing that's going on with COVID and with lockdown, it's really playing on all of our mental health altogether. But from studies, we do know that obviously people within the LGBT community are significantly affected more when it comes to mental health. This week, the theme is kindness. So that's why I want to do it around whether these times are being kind to the LGBT mind. I have suffered with mental health myself. It started about 10 years ago when I first started trying to figure out, who I was as a person and coming out. And even though you do move past those sort of dark days and you end up being happier, when you are put in those stressful situations, it does like to rear its head over again. So that's why I think it's a really important thing for us to be having this type of conversation. So today we have an amazing group of people here to discuss this. So I want to introduce you to our fabulous panel. So the first person we have up is Miss Daisy Puller, and she is a drag queen, drag performer in London, and you look absolutely fabulous. Well,
just something I slipped on.
Just something last minute.
Exactly.
And then we have Rich Miles. So Rich Miles is the CEO and co-founder of the Diversity and Standards Collective, and also a board member at Outvertising. So hi, Rich, welcome.
Hi there. I'm sadly not as pretty. I'm more overgrown and hairy today.
And then we have Jamie Jefferson. So Jamie is the Chief Creative Officer and co-founder of Equator and is also an I&D Council member on BIMA. So welcome, thank you very much. We also have Christopher Kenna. So Chris is the CEO and founder of Brand Advance and is also the Director of Diversity and Inclusion on Outvertising. And then welcome Chris as well. And then we have another Chris, so there's going to be two Chris's here, so I'm going to have to go with Chris K and Chris M when we're going with questions. But we have Dr. Chris Morris Roberts here with us today. Chris has worked in the NHS, University of East London and the University of Brighton, and Chris is currently a lecturer at London Met. So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for being part of this conversation and for giving me your time to discuss these things. So just to let everyone know, if you're attending, please use the Q&A little button at the bottom if you want to be asked any questions. We will have a little time at the end to go through anyone's questions that they might have. But if you use the chat window, we won't really be able to see it. So if you just want to use the Q&A one, that's just in the middle of the screen. Great. So let's get started. So Chris Kenna, I'm going to start with you. So with you being a part of the LGBT community, how do you think it's been affecting the LGBT community's mental health, and has it been affecting your mental health?
Let me explain first why you're only seeing a picture of me without a mouth moving, because this has also led into a bit of a deterioration, I suppose, of my mental and physical health at the moment. I went for a run, came back to my apartment block and tried to run up the stairs at the back and slipped and smashed my teeth out. So sort of hit a concrete stair, smashed my teeth out, and because all the dentists are shut, I've not been able to get any teeth put back in my mouth. They've put these like circle things, I can't explain them more than circle things where teeth should be. So not a pretty sight, so I thought I'd spaze all that. But back to the question. I mean, currently, it's been hard for everybody, whether you're LGBTQ plus or not. It's a hard period. I think the latter end of this month, even more. And there's been a lot of focus, there's two defining, well, they're not defining, but there's two things about me. I'm mixed race, so I'm sort of part of the BIMA community, and I'm LGBT. I'm a gay father of two teenagers. I think up until, recently, I was personally doing okay, even before the smashing my own teeth out. The latter end of this month has been difficult, I think, and I don't know. I can only speak for my own truth, and it's been difficult, the latter end of this month. Just the walls have felt more closed in. I don't think there's been much focus publicly or anywhere really on the LGBT community and the troubles they may be going through. There seems to have been a lot. The reason why I mentioned that I was mixed race is because there's been a lot for Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, how they're being unduly affected by COVID in places and stuff. There's been a lot about abuse at home, etc. But I don't think there's been a real focus on the unique problems that the LGBT community might be going through right now. Sort of locked in the house with a family that either don't know or do not accept, that you're LGBT. Abusive partners in same-sex relationships. The list can go on. So I really think that there could be more highlight. I'm glad that this panel is bringing it to the forefront, but I think, from government through to the way brands are positioning themselves through COVID, trying to be helpful, I think a lot more could attach themselves to the problems that the LGBT community could be going through at the moment. But not to take up everybody's speaking time, I'm getting through okay. As soon as they give me some new dentures, I'll be a lot happier. But I think now's the time where we can all be a closer community and really be there for each other. I think that's the message, really.
Yeah, and I think like what you call out there, that there is so many different areas to the LGBT community that are being affected in different types of ways. I just want to go over quickly to Daisy. So Daisy, like you work as a drag queen, you have lots of friends who work as drag queens, and obviously they're being significantly affected at the moment without any bars being open, people being able to perform, not having a steady income. How's that been for you and for the people that that work within the industry?
Well, in my circle of friends and colleagues, almost everybody's main source of income dried up overnight, just like that. The bars had to shut, the clubs had to shut. And it's not just performers, it's the DJs, it's the bar staff, and it's the venues themselves. LGBTQ venues in London are suffering as it is without this kind of financial blow as well. So I think everyone really spiraled around me, everyone just like freaked out, myself included. I didn't, we were just like, what is happening? Like everybody. But I think the queers are resilient, we're hustlers. And it's been incredible over the last 2 months to see the digital drag shows that are coming out. The Glory are doing like a live TV show. So people are really like adapting their art to the circumstances. And I guess that's what artists do. We take a shitty situation and we make something fabulous. Because what else can you do? You have to laugh or you'd cry. I think for me, I guess, whilst I have a slightly larger audience, I'd really like to call out some of the things that people can do themselves to help performers. There's a lot of performers are doing amazing online shows, and venues are running hardship funds to support their staff during this time. I have a friend who's donating his travel card money, the £40 that he'd normally spend on getting to work every day on the tube, that he's not spending at the moment. It's barely anything. And he is just each week picking a different show or a different performer and donating that money to them. And I think that's a really nice way. And he might feel like it's not making a big difference, but for somebody who's making absolutely no money, 40 quid in their pocket in a week is actually really incredible. And if you can't contribute financially, there's lots of other ways that you can support performers. We run on 95% vodka and attention. So, some shout outs on social media, share some of your favorite performers' shows or artworks, or just like and comment, and that's a really good way to just be kind to each other, is to support each other, because at the moment, being creative is, God, it really takes a lot out of you.
Yeah, I know we did something a couple of months ago for Easter. So I don't know if you know Just May. We have her like loads of times over at the company, and we decided to do an Easter quiz, which she hosted, which was so much fun. Like, we'd never done it before. We were like, let's just give it a go. And we were able to, you know, put her link in the comment, like in the chat window, and anyone that was on, if they could donate, then they could donate. Do you know what I mean? And I think that organizations and companies can start really helping, you know, people within those communities to try and, even if it's like you said, just a little bit to help donate.
Exactly. You know, I mean, there's all of this rhetoric about us all being in the same boat, but it's really not true. You know, some of us are on the lifeboat and others are clinging to the raft, you know, like door, pushing Jack off as he's backing us down. So I think it's really great when we're able to sort of share the wealth collectively, you know, for people that maybe are a little bit better off at the moment. And we'll make it up to you. We'll entertain you. We'll make you happy.
Sparkles.
Sparkles!
I'm going to come over to you. So Jamie, you identify as a trans woman. And I just want to ask you, you know, just with seeing everything that's going on, the craziness in the world, you know, in the US and the UK, how has that been for you being a trans woman, and also for the trans community in this time?
Well, I mean, I think, do you know, the biggest thing I've noticed is, sorry, I'm feeling like really, really insignificant in my hair. I'm like, oh my God. And also my horrible kitchen. So lots of apologies to made. I think all the points so far have been really, really canny in terms of the fact that there is very little support, and there's a lot of people, certainly in the trans community, who are not in a safe environment, not in a supportive environment, or are more isolated than they ever used to be. And I think that's a real problem. And I've noticed, and I don't know if it's just because I'm bored and I spend a lot more time on Twitter than I would usually, but I'm just seeing so much this vitriol stuff about, you know, whether this debate about whether trans people should exist or not. There was a letter this morning that some baroness wrote, I don't know if you saw this, like literally this morning, to the chairman of Marks and Spencer's to suggest that they should, based on the Equalities Act of 2010, stop trans women going into the ladies' changing rooms. Because obviously we are abusive and, you know, voyeuristic and so on and so forth. And it's that kind of stuff's like disgusting, because, you know, like you're stuck at home and you're already dealing with all of this mental health things, and you're reading these people who are out there privileged, you know, whatever, privileged in class maybe, but not in spelling. The tweet was particularly badly put together, I have to say, but the message was as disgusting as the grammar. I know. It was basically this idea that, you know, the debate of isn't like, you know, how should we look after people? It's like whether we should be allowed to exist in the world. And I think that's really horrible, and it's really hard to take. And I think you know, when you're sort of, so people who are cooped up, having that kind of experience, combined with the fact, you know, I had this experience a couple of months ago, or maybe more than that, a few months ago anyway, where because I'm pathetic, I didn't organize my hormone appointment, right? And the doctor's so busy, like there's hardly any doctors. So there's like one doctor in Scotland does it privately. And I couldn't get another appointment for like 2 months. And I was like out of my drugs, right? And that's horrible. I actually had panic attacks. It was horrible. And now there's so little care available. I mean, I'm on the waiting list for the NHS. I've been on the waiting list for 2.5 years. I have no idea how long that's going to last. It's ridiculous. And there's no sense of anything changing. And I can imagine with an overloaded NHS and probably reduced funding for it in the near future, it ain't going to get any better. So I'm very nervous about those people who are perhaps in a, you know, a different stage. And I'm really, really, you know, in one way, I'm super lucky. Like I've got work, I've got a nice family. I mean, they are nice. Trust me, if they appear in the background, you'll see them. But I'm really, really privileged in that sense. And so I'm on a stable footing, but there will be a lot of people who really aren't. And I really find that worrying. And it's because it's a minority, because it's a small group of people, you know, does anybody really care? I think, you know, all I can say is it's up to us to sort of help support each other and be kind. And be there for each other.
Yeah, I mean, like, especially what you said, I mean, I can't imagine what it must be like to be on a waiting list for so many years, you know, waiting to, you know, transition or be on that next part of your journey, and just like all of a sudden it's just put at a halt, and you don't know when it's gonna pick up again or when it's gonna continue, and that must just be so hard mentally for people to go through.
Precisely. Yeah, it really is.
So Dr. Chris M. So obviously with everyone in lockdown, you know, people must be struggling so much. I know that you've studied a lot around like body dysmorphia. Like, you know, people must be struggling so much when it comes to that side of things as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Particularly, you know, as we know in the gay community, there is quite a lot of fixation on body issues, the perfect body, understanding our bodies, what our bodies mean to us. Are they attractive? Are they not? How much, you know, it's a huge issue. And I think through, actually, if you're in lockdown and you've sort of spent 2 months inside and gyms being shut, and I think it's all very across the board from my social media and reading Twitter and Facebook, etc. There are a lot of people concerned about their weight and trying to do exercise at home and this does cause a spiral effect of how you feel about yourself and what that means to you through the body you're living in. And so sort of partly like talk a bit about my personal experience. So last year, it was a bit dramatic. I ended up with meningitis, and then I got sepsis, and it's left me with heart failure, this condition. So I'm one of the high-risk groups that sit around the house all the time. And it is really interesting how those mental health issues of isolation, of trying to reach out or find people or connection and your body really starts to play in the back of your mind, and you have to work. It's not easy to not let that dark side of your brain sort of creep in and go, oh God, you're not good enough. Oh, you're going to get fat. Oh, no one's going to love you. No one's going to, you know, and they seem very simple issues, but actually they can become really problematic issues for people. And I'm very much one of my big things that I do. So I spend a lot of time talking about men and their bodies and what their bodies mean to them. And that's what my PhD research was in. And I'm a big advocate of reaching out and talking to people. And when you have those dark thoughts, or you're feeling that you're not quite right, or you're not, pick up the phone, call someone, say you're not feeling great, because there'll be a friend out there that will reassure you and make you feel just that bit better about yourself. Because, and you know, each of us are different, and we all feel slightly different about those issues. It's incredibly challenging for, I think, the LGBTQIA community at this time. Yeah,
it's interesting that you talk about, you know, calling a friend, and I think hopefully most of us are lucky enough that we have, you know, people to call or someone that we have that we can discuss this with. But Rich, I just want to come to you, Rich Miles. You know, we've heard a lot about, you know, the older generation with lockdown and COVID, how they've, you know, been affected so badly. What do you think that's like for people who are LGBT but also fall within that older generation and, you know, might not have people to contact or are really suffering in isolation at the moment? Oh, you're on mute, Rich.
There we are. All the technical issues. Yeah, no, sadly, the older LGBT part of the community is kind of disproportionately affected, I think, by this. And that goes back to it goes back to mental health, but it goes back to historical, like the non-acceptance of being LGBT. We've got to remember that, you know, it's still, you know, the world still isn't that accepting of us, but it has come a long way since the 70s and 80s. There was actually a survey done in 83 that was asked the British public, do you think same-sex relationships are okay? And only 17% said yes. That was done again 3 years ago, and 64% said yes. So the difference of growing up in those times means that, you know, people who are, say, over 50 are more likely to have faced homophobia, violence from people, just non-acceptance from everybody that they kind of see. And it leads you into, you know, you suffer trauma from that. And there's a lot of mental health issues that come from non-acceptance. You know, you have to learn to accept yourself as an LGBT person before you can even look at being accepted by others. So the older generation are more often than not, you know, living alone. They may have been rejected from their families from when they came out, because again, that wasn't accepted, and they still have not rekindled that relationship. They're more likely to not have had kids. So, you know, especially for, you know, say 70s or 80s, you haven't got anyone to come and check on you if you're unable to get out, or if you suffer from a disability. So there's a lot of things that you end up growing up. You know, we know that the LGBT community is quite social. You know, a lot of us are. That's a bit of a sweeping statement, but you know, we thrive on our chosen family, a lot of us, because our own families aren't as accepting as they should be. And as we get older, those chosen families, especially if they're, you know, if a lot of our friends are straight, end up getting married, having kids, and following that kind of heteronormative journey, which actually singles the kind of gay friends out. So you end up being alone. You end up feeling like you can't call people, you don't want to intrude, or you just don't have that close person who's willing to come and check on you. So it does leave you quite isolated. And I think that's obviously a really difficult thing. And there is places out there. There's Open Doors. There's a charity, an LGBT charity that actually gets younger LGBT people to give people a call, or get on a video call with the older generation, just to make sure they're okay. Because you've got things like HIV. Obviously, there was a lot more of the kind of older generation kind of had it during that time, and so, you know, that not having no access to treatment, being less likely to want to go to the doctors or use local services, is also something that kind of segregates us, because you're scared of homophobia, so you're less likely to go to those services or use the police or ask things. So there's a lot of things that happen that mean that you don't want to reach out, and you kind of let yourself be alone, which obviously isn't a good place to be in.
Yeah, you touched on HIV there, and I just want to come to Daisy, because you've been quite open with me talking about HIV and your own HIV status. What do you think it means for people who are going through this, who are diagnosed with HIV?
Yeah, I was diagnosed HIV positive myself about 2 years ago. And I have always been very lucky in that I've got a very supportive partner and family and friend network around me. So even through all of that, I felt incredibly disconnected and isolated, especially when I was first diagnosed. And with 1 in 5 people living with HIV reporting feelings of isolation or separation at the best of times, you can really imagine how a lot of that is weighing on them as they are even further physically separated from their network. So I guess it kind of comes in a little bit to what Dr. Chris was talking about, and again what Rich touched on, in how important peer support is. Not just, I mean, within HIV, it's incredibly effective, so much so that they're looking at rolling out peer support into all of the sexual health clinics when they can. And so I work with a charity called Positively UK. It's not strictly for LGBTQ people, but it does work entirely with people living with HIV. And one of their main programs is a network of volunteer peer mentors, of which I'm one. And so in this time, we've been able to sort of keep in touch with our mentees through, you know, things like Zoom and phone calls and stuff. And it's incredibly important. And some of the stories that you hear, some of the demons that rear their head at a time like this are really, really, really heartbreaking. And so I guess anybody who's watching who perhaps is living with HIV and feels a little bit lonely, I'd really recommend you reach out to someone like Positively UK or Terence Higgins Trust, who also runs a peer mentor network. And even in this time, those charities are still working, and they are still connecting people with mentors if they do contact the charity. And it's really so vital. I mean, I definitely attribute so much of my healing to my own peer mentor and the people that I met through Positively UK, especially when I was first diagnosed. I know that, and this is actually an exciting time, because we could potentially get ahead of our goals to have 0 transmissions of HIV by 2030. So if people are at home, they could do home testing kits. So for example, SHL send out a free home testing kit. You can test yourself even for HIV. Simpler diagnoses can be done over the phone, or you can go into the clinic. But if you do, you know, get a positive HIV result, I do know that clinics like Dean Street and Jonathan Mann Centre at Hamilton Hospital will still be able to see you, or be able to provide virtual support.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so Chris, Kenna, so something you touched on earlier, you were speaking about, you know, because you're part of the BAME community, and you know, how we've seen in the media how much they've been affected by this. Which other, you know, obviously we're talking about the LGBT community now, but we have to, you know, the conversation around intersectionality plays such a big part. And which other communities do you think are also affected by this, that, you know, people might also fall within the LGBT community?
Yeah, well, as you said, you know, BAME has been sort of, I don't know what the word is, unduly affected by COVID-19, i.e. in some places it is a 2-to-1 rate. You know, it wasn't that long ago where the sort of statistics were 100% of all doctors that had died from COVID-19 were BAME. Something like 57% of all nurses, and up to 70% of everybody that was in intensive care, you know. And it's not just here, it's not just the UK. In the US, Chicago, with something like 30% of Chicago is African American, but over 70% of the deaths in Chicago have been African American. And, you know, the debate will go on for a while on what the reasons for that is. Is it socioeconomic? Is it, you know, one major thing at the moment is 2.5 months ago, you know, we called people low-skilled workers. Now they're called key workers. And then people are bus drivers, street cleaners, nurses, you know, these were all called low-paid workers. And they were predominantly from, you know, a BAME community, majority sometimes, in some sectors. You know, not across the board, obviously, but in some sectors, most definitely. And now they're called key workers. And so mindsets have changed of, you know, not just of that demographic, but of the way we look at people now. And then, as you said, intersectionality as well, you know. So you could be what was a low-paid worker, but now you're a key worker. But you're also LGBT as well. So you are a Black or mixed ethnicity or BAME LGBT person. You've sort of, you know, so not only have you got the problems that we're all talking about here now from any demographic within LGBTQ+, but also you've got that worry of the very, you know, the very birth or the very, there's two demographics. I'm mixing my words. I think my fake teeth are getting in the way. You've got these sort of two problems that are going on. You know, you've got all of the problems that we're all getting in our own different worlds with being LGBT and being confined within this, you know, the world. 2 months ago, the world actually starts spinning. You know, we never thought that could happen. This is a movie. This is a movie on a movie. You know, like, what is it on Netflix? It's like #2 most watched in the UK. It's been there for ages. I think it's Pandemic or the other one.
Contagion.
Yeah. But literally, this is it. Actually, it's worse than the movie because they never stopped the world in the movie. You know, the world continued, just people died in it. The world actually stopped. You know, so you've got that to contend with. Like, it's not a small thing. Yes, we are the luxury to live, you know, in nice apartments and nice houses, and you know, hopefully everybody on this screen at least has, you know, friends and family and extended family and chosen family to sort of to speak to, and a lot of other people don't have that. But then also on top of that, you're watching the news every day where, you know, never have I seen people on TV talk about BAME, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, so much. You know, the government, every time they stand up and give us a brief, people are asking them questions and saying, why are Black people dying more than white people? And I think, so, you know, intersectionality is, there are people within the LGBTQ+ community that are people of colour that have just got this other thing to contend with, this other added weight that not only am I going through the strife that everyone's going through as well, but also the world is telling me I'm twice as likely to die, you know, in places. That's probably not factually correct, but that's what the world is saying. You know, we're seeing it everywhere, that Black people are dying at a rate twice as much as white people, and we don't know why. So yeah, I think it's intersectionality sometimes is pushed. I am director of intersectionality at Outvertising, and at Outvertising, it's a very important thing. And me as a Black business leader, it's an important thing as well, because I'm Black. You know, my Blackness is just as important as my gayness, is just as important as being a father, you know, all of these things. Yeah. I think, you know, hopefully coming out of this, we now think about intersectionality more, you know, not just we're LGBT, but what are the different facets of LGBTQ plus, what, you know, and the nuances for them different demographics, what actually affects white LGBT, you know, there may be something added or something less that it affects or is on the minds of people of color that are in the LGBT community. So hopefully this, you know, this absolute strange, crazy, traumatic and devastating period, some growth can come from that. We can continue these conversations. Yes, all of our prides have stopped or they've gone online, but, you know, the fight continues, you know, out of the ashes can sort of the phoenix of a sort of more open-minded world, I hope, can come out of this, because now we are all one. You know, yeah. I know we're not all going through the same thing, and don't you know, I'm not silly-minded to think that, but we've realized the world is one place. When it stops spinning, we all suffer, you know. Yeah. So I think hopefully we can now start to sort of act a bit more as one. That was a bit of a monologue, but
no, and the thing is, you touched on there about like the whole shift of the mind and mind change and how everyone should be thinking differently. And it's also around, you know, organizations, like how are organizations thinking, how are they treating diversity and inclusion? You know, we know more now than ever that we need to stay engaged with everyone. We need to make sure that even though we're not in the office and we're not having office parties or whatever we're doing, we're still being able to stay inclusive, even if it's on Zoom calls. So like Rich, I know you and Chris both work in this area quite a lot. What do you think organizations should be sort of like looking at, or how they should be approaching this?
Well, I think there's two parts, and there's a sad part to this whole pandemic, which is that constantly I keep hearing that more LGBT, people of colour, people with disabilities have been put on furlough or kind of let go from companies because they sadly have either D&I roles or in lower roles. They're not in, you know, we all know what the stats are on C-suite staff. So actually they're being let go. So sadly, like a lot of people that, because I know, are putting on their LinkedIn that they're leaving. So there's a lot of things that we need to do as companies to make sure that we are actually looking at the types of people we're letting go as well, and not just picking, you know, looking at money. I know that's easier said than done. But it just seems that we've done so much hard work getting people of diversity into businesses, and they're the first ones to be chucked out. So I think we need to just remember, you know, what is important to our business, and diversity and culture is morally right, but it's also got a good business case to make your, you know, business better. But in regards to, you know, reaching out to people who are diverse within your company, I think you just need to, there's a lot more effort that needs to go into it, because people respond differently. People with disabilities, people with who are LGBT respond differently to feedback or what they need. So I would just advise people to email your whole team and kind of say, you know, we do hope you're okay. Is there, you know, if this is the ways that we can reach out to you, let us know the best one that you respond to. And we will keep reaching out to you. And I think it's just those little calls, even if it's just 2 minutes to check in, to say, I'm just thinking about you. Let's make sure you're okay. It changes your whole day. I mean, I live alone. I have a child half the week, luckily, which kind of changes the whole scenario. But when you kind of live alone, you're not having any contact. So I think it's important. You know, luckily I'm part of Outvertising, and we have our socials every week, where you've got a load of us getting together, and we go, you know, there's a lot of us, and we go around individually to make sure everyone's okay. So it's really nice to have those sort of things. So I think companies need to be making sure they're not just talking about work all the time. They're talking about people, and they're giving people a voice who may not be the loudest speakers, or they may not be able to articulate their words properly, but they're given a voice and they're respected with what they kind of say.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Jamie, did you want to add to that? You look like you were wanting to.
I did. Oh no, I was going to comment on that issue about people being put on furlough is really just the same issue as the type of jobs LGBT people are able to get and BAME folk are able to get. I mean, if there wasn't that equality in the first place, it wouldn't be an issue. So obviously this highlights the challenge. I mean, you know, I'm lucky. I own my own company. I'm not going to sack myself quite yet. But the idea of finding another job in any situation terrifies me. You know, the idea of walking in and sort of like, because I have to do pitches, and it terrifies me there. You know, because you don't know how people feel about you and so on. I was going to say, like, I think that the isolation thing is a really, really important topic, and you guys have all sort of touched on this ability to notice how you feel and reach out when you need support. I was unfortunately I had to go to the Priory, which was a lot less rock and roll than it sounds, and I did lots and lots of therapy. And actually, what I found out was, if you are aware of the things that you physically do, or ways of acting, or ways of just responding when you're not in a great place, then it's easy to create actions to fix that. So whether that's phoning a friend, or listening to a piece of music that you like, or going for a walk, or any of those things, it can be really, really helpful. But this is magnified for anybody that's in LGBT community, because I just feel like it's the analogy to being in lockdown to being in the closet is actually huge. And on the one hand, I'm like, bitch, I've been in the closet for 35 years, so I can deal with a few weeks of being in the house. But on the other hand, you know, we talk about closet. It sounds like, it's okay, son, go. No, go. It's okay. It's like people talk about the closet, and it's like, I didn't think about it, but you know, you think of a piece of furniture rather comically, but it's not. It's a kind of cocoon of self-hatred, and this, like the closet of lockdown, is a little bit like that. If you're not in a great place, all of those negative voices can come up if you haven't got some support there. And I think that genuine, not just like, I get to speak to people at work all the time, which is fab, but that's not the same thing, because, you know, at work I have to be conscious to leave gender at the door. Like, I can't bring that to the table. And I certainly don't have people at my work going, oh, you're okay, so you're accepted and you're valid. And, you know, in my heart, I need some of that sometimes. There's those voices, they don't go away. You just have to deal with it. So being stuck at home on your own, having those voices, is a very, very hard place to be. So the need for sort of kindness and mutual support and proactive support, like you guys said, like reaching out to people, is so, so important.
I think as well, Jimmy, if you don't mind me just quickly adding in, is, you know, like this has been put on by an agency. I think there is a big opportunity right now for brands, you know, to be a part of this, to be a part of the solution. You know, every brand at the moment is looking to be helpful. You know, nobody wants a toothpaste ad right now, least of all me. But nobody wants a toothpaste ad. But we all want to know how to look after our dental hygiene. You know, we all want to know what to do when the dentists aren't open for the next 3 months. So, you know, helpfulness is exactly what everybody's looking for, and brands can really tap into that. And not just the helpfulness, but also, you know, that helpfulness can be across some of these problems that different demographics are going through. You know, what brand doesn't want to, not only, I mean, don't get me wrong, we know what they're all wanting to do at the very last level, and that is sell more of their product. But actually, the route to getting there could be, you know, to highlight some of the current problems that the LGBTQ plus community is going through, and not the whole community at once, you know, because we are unique. There are unique demographics within the community, and we're unique people within them demographics. But actually to highlight a story, a true emotive story, that a brand that not only is going to give empathy towards that brand and make it relevant in a time where not much is relevant in the world at the moment. Do you know what I mean? The only things that are relevant is what time is Tesco's open and can I exercise now all the time? You know, like the rest is becoming a little bit, do I need to see a billboard that tells me that that's the new flashiest thing? Probably is not. But actually, there's a lot of problems going on right now that a brand could, you know, lend their consumer power to, lend their voice to really help that, not just the people affected by that problem, but a wider community as well. And I really think, you know, not only is there the opportunity, there's a bit of a duty, you know, for brands now, you know, to really help us.
Well, it's their audience. I always say it's your audience. I think a lot of brands, when you say things like that, they'll say back to you, "Oh, yeah, well, we want to spend our money on our mass audience and not on like diverse demographics." And I know Chris and I shout about it all the time, that actually, you know, mass market is built up of diverse people. There's not a separate market realistically for diversity. I mean, there is, but there's, you know, your mass market is full of women, men, over 50s, LGBT, people with disabilities. And we've been buying products from advertisements that show straight white families and people, able-bodied people for years. You know, all you're doing is actually speaking to us properly or reaching out to us properly. And there's statistics also that show how your mass market and the people who aren't part of those diverse demographics respond better to companies and brands that are speaking and reaching out to diversity, because especially young people like Gen Z, they're really hot on it. Like, you speak out and you're doing something that's socially and morally, you know, right, they're going to talk about your brand far more than any other thing. So I think that's the business case for doing it, and the moral case, like Chris said, is really super important.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know if you agree, but I cannot watch one more advert that has people on Zoom talking to each other. Like, I spend my life. And as soon as these adverts come on, I go, I can't look at it, turn it off.
There's definitely a little bit of fatigue, I think, with like lockdown related content, you know, like initially all the queens kind of put out these like, oh, I'm on lockdown. And it was quite funny. But now the last thing I want to see is another queen in a dressing gown, you know, even though a week ago I thought it was hilarious. Now I want like fantasy and I want escape. And I noticed that in the comments, Paul has said, you know, he feels a little bit of fatigue himself from sort of all of these events and this kind of pressure to participate in everything. And I guess I would say, and personally, I have like checked out of a lot of stuff. You know, opting out is just as valid as opting in.
Yeah.
And all of these things are available to you should you choose to want to do it. And sometimes you just don't want to. You know, we do me and my best friend do a family quiz every Saturday night. And one night I was like, I just don't want to. And that's okay. You just say, I don't want to. And I think that, you know, we can be kind to each other by also being kind to ourselves, and, you know, sometimes acknowledging that weirdly, actually being alone for a little bit longer is what we actually want right now.
I've spoken about this quite a lot recently to do with, it's really important that to deal with the mental health, you need to find, you know, you can reach out to people and you can engage with people, but partly if you're on your own or if you're dealing with, you know, your mental health on your own, you need to find strategies to deal with your day in a positive way. And that, you know, I'm very much one about structure and organization. Like, you get up as if you're going to work. Even if you're walking to the kitchen, you're still up, you've got your coffee. Do you engage in yoga? Do you do meditation? Are you gonna, you know, what's your treat for the day? Is it going to be an episode of 4 in the bed? That's my treat for the afternoon. I treat myself to 4 in the bed. That's not 4 men in a bed. That's the TV show.
That's not allowed, Chris.
They're COVID free, I promise. No.
As long as they're from your household.
But these are really important things about that they help with your mental health and your well-being and your existence at home, about having the things that give you that, you know, contentment when you know, when it all feels very, and I definitely think in the last probably week or 2 weeks, people are more edgy than they used to be, and they're feeling a bit more, I want to get out. Or you could say going out is a bit more risk-taking. Where I live in East London, like, it's like a normal day every day. Like, out there, no one really engaged with the lockdown in the way.
It's the same here in Clapham. It's just like you walk out and literally people just everywhere. I'm like, is everyone doing this whole lockdown thing? Or
yeah,
I thought it was a lie. The bit of me was like, is it a conspiracy? The only thing I don't see is children.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point though, because one of my close friends, and Daisy can correct me if my facts here are wrong, but he's HIV positive, and obviously he's classed as high risk, so he's actually staying in. He has to stay in longer, And so he's actually now at this point where all of his friends are starting to go out and head out. And even if they're being a bit naughty, they're heading out. But he actually has to stay put, and he can't go out. And he's got, he goes out to get medication, and that's it. So he's feeling a lot more isolated when I spoke to him, because now it's even getting to him worse, because he's seeing all his mates outside and they're all kind of meeting up for barbecues, and it's starting to, they're seeing exit, and he still can't. So I think that's something also to remember. Not to bring it down a peg or two.
As a member, as a high risk community member with heart failure, it does feel daunting. The strategy I use about when can I see people again? I haven't seen my family in 8 weeks, and my strategy is I just deal with tomorrow, and then once tomorrow comes, I deal with the next day. Because the idea of back, 8 weeks ago, the idea of where I am now felt totally overwhelming, and everyone wanted a Zoom and everything. And I was reading Paul O'Leary's comments about being bombarded. I did feel a bit bombarded because everyone was trying to reach out, and actually, you don't know if you want everyone to reach out. Are you okay? Are you fine? Are you? But it's nice that it's there if you want to. But I think finding your own strategies is really important in that. And for lifelong strategies, to be honest.
Yeah. No,
Can I just circle back to the comment about people living with HIV being more vulnerable? This was something that really freaked me out initially, because we all received letters, anybody who's being treated by an HIV clinic, saying that we are part of the vulnerable category, which of course, when you are diagnosed HIV positive, every day you're terrified that something's going to kill you, and this was really problematic because actually I'm undetectable. So that means that the medication that I'm on, that I take every day, has brought the my viral load down to such a suppressed level that it does no harm to my immune system. So even though I'm living with HIV, I'm not considered immunosuppressed. And in that respect, I'm at no more risk of contracting COVID, or if I did contract it, there wouldn't be complications, so to speak. Your friend may not yet be undetectable, which of course would be a problem, or he may have other conditions which are complicated by his HIV status.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Daisy.
So, I personally freaked out when I heard about it. I was just like, oh my God. And so I made sure that I did.
It must be scary getting a letter from it must be scary getting a letter from the government all about it. I mean, that's pretty daunting a thing.
It was a bit messed up. And my peer mentor at Jonathan Mann actually does a lot of work with NHS liaison, and he hit the roof. And since, there's now been another round of letters gone out for people that truly are in vulnerable categories, and thankfully I did not receive one of those. But I think it's really important because it does when people hear that, and I had a lot of people reach out to me saying, oh my God, are you okay? Because, of the thing. And it kind of reinforced some of those untrue stigmas that do still exist around HIV, and people's information about how medication works nowadays isn't being updated. So, I'll step down.
No, thank you very much. That's very, very useful. Very useful to know. So just before we finish, we've only got about 6 minutes left. So we've got 2 questions in the Q&A, and then I'm going to quickly answer before I say thank yous and all that. So Jamie, if you feel comfortable answering this question, someone has asked. Jürgen has asked, when and how did you make the decision on which toilets to use? The first time in the ladies must have been extremely daunting for you.
Well, I'm okay to answer it, but I did answer it to Jürgen on the little questionnaire, on the question thing.
Oh, you did? Okay.
It's so interesting because what I know, I mean, it's horrible. It's horrible because what you imagine is it's a bit like, at school, and the girls' toilets and the boys' toilets are like, no go, right? So to go, it felt like I was going to get lynched by every single person in there. And, my photograph on Mumsnet and all this kind of stuff. What actually happened was literally nothing. And except for me sort of skulking about like there was something wrong, right? Because I felt it was all, it was all in my head. The negativity was all in my head. And this is the problem with all this narrative out there that's sort of saying, there's loads of, like the idea of there being lots of people that don't support trans people and think that, I should have have to take my trousers down in order to sort of work out which toilet I'm allowed into. I mean, the idea is patently ridiculous. And if I was a trans man, then what do I do? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's fucking insane. Sorry, excuse me.
No, sorry.
So the whole thing is ridiculous, but it's about one's own sense of validity. And I think that this is it's a real big thing, and it really kind of grates with me, this idea that, I would like to feel like I'm allowed to exist in the world and not have my existence debated because people can't be bothered changing their toilets or their legal structures or those kind of things. And when I'm in the situation like we are now, when there's even less visibility, like trans people are not in the press, they're only in the news when it's a sensationalist, nonsense thing. And that's really, really hard to take. It really kind of eats me up. But the one source of positivity I can think of with that is that I genuinely do believe that things are moving in a positive direction. For LGBTQ plus folk as a whole, and certainly for trans people. I mean, when I was little, like I had the joy of meeting Grayson Perry last year, and I'd read his autobiography just before, and it was exactly my experience. Basically what I feel like I am is a sex pest, right? It's that bad. I cannot let anybody know. This is disgusting. It's horrible. And so I lived with that all my life. And the tide is slowly turning, and it's really lovely to see that there's acceptance out there. And I think that the one thing I can think of is trans people represent about I think it's 0.1% of the UK population, right? And there's this whole thing about people sort of saying, oh, they're getting silenced by trans people wanting, a piece of some sort of pie, imaginary pie. And I think that it's interesting because I think it's impossible for 0.1% of the population to silence anybody. The reason why some people feel it being silenced is because there's a growing amount of support amongst other people. And that just fills me with so much hope that it's not the trans people support that's sort of silencing others. It's everybody who is in support of people who are open, people who are, visible, and people and celebrating the color of all of the different types of people there are, and allowing those people to exist. That's what it stands for, and that's what it's all about, and it's amazing. So I kind of take heart from that things are going in the right direction, and they're going in the right direction because not just for LGBT people, but right-thinking people all over the country, not like Liz Truss and whatever, right-thinking people all over the country are in support and are making a change. And, actually, the other day when I went into the girls' to finish the thing, when I went into the girls' toilets and I was washing my hands afterwards, this girl comes up next to me and she's like, oh, I love your makeup. What kind of foundation is that? And I'm like, what the hell? I thought you were going to hit me with a bat. So real people are lovely. It's just nonsense. And so one has to remember that, and that's what the LGBT plus community is here to do, is to remind each other of that. And if you like, punch up rather than punch down. Not in the toilets, of course, no punching.
No, not in the toilets. Well, thank you so much, Jamie. That is a lovely way to end our session today. I just want to say a massive, huge thank you to all of the speakers that have joined me today, and for taking the time of your day to have this conversation, to make this conversation be heard. I want to say a special thank you to Headline, especially Nadia Hussein, and thank you to everyone. And be kind to your minds this week, everyone. And see you later.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.